Hello YouTube. What you're seeing here is my mulcher in operation. Not a very professional operator, he's my brother, it's the first time using it. But that machine there has a big metal roller at the back, and in front of that is an even bigger roller with hammers attached to it, and those hammers smash up everything in their path, and then the roller rolls the final result. So off he goes to mulch up some rows for me, and I'm sure he's going to have some fun with that. To give you an idea of the finished product of a mulcher, I'll take you over here to block 5. Don't do many videos at block 5, it's a bit of a problem block for me because of its slope. This is the one that Garth and I walked through in the first edition of the macadamia show a few weeks ago, and it had been left with there was chip under the tree, which you'll see in a second, but it had been left very uneven by the excavator tyres and everything else. Now the mulcher came along and cleaned it all up, and as you can see there's a nice flat surface going on throughout the block. This is something that farmers are starting to do now in preparation for their annual harvest. They mulch up the block, make a nice straight path for the nuts to fall on, and they do fall, and the harvesters come along. They then have much fewer problems picking up the nuts because the sticks and other things are mulched up. Now obviously you've got to time it right. You've got to time it to just before your first harvest, before the nuts start falling. If you do it after the nuts start falling, all you're going to be doing is mulching up your crop, which is the last thing you want. So there's the pre-harvest stage. And the only other update is that apart from mowing, which is going to be a fairly regular task still, we have to put up the last round of wasp cards, which I did today. They should be hatching at the end of this week and killing, hopefully, anything that remains of nut borer in the crop. The jury's out on whether we need another spray. My agronomist is keeping a close eye on things like broad mite, the last remnants of fruit spotting bug, and even any macadamia nut borer that made it through the wasp cards. But so far, we're reasonably confident we've had our last spray and we can move into harvest mode. And that brings me to the topic of this video, which is what is going to happen to the macadamia price in 2021. And that's all farmers are talking about at the moment, and even potential buyers of farms. That's all they're talking about, because the price of macadamias is one of the key governing factors for profitability of macadamia farms. The market leader, Marquee Macadamias, or formerly MPC, before they merged with a Gold Coast macadamia company. Marquee is the market leader, and in fact, by market leader, they process about 50% of Australia's macadamias. So they're by far and away the biggest player. The smaller players tend to wait until Marquee releases their price so that they follow suit, or they try and beat the price or match it or stay competitive with the market leader. In that way, they obviously keep their market share, or perhaps even improve it a little. We're all waiting for that announcement. It tends to come around the start of February, but there's no fixed date. Last year, Marquee, who'd only just become Marquee, put out big ads and made a great big splash and said, one great big company, one great big price, $6 a kilo. And that caused a hasty readjustment in any of the other players who'd already introduced a price of $5 something. They sharpened their pencil a bit and started offering more. And a lot matched it. The price got as high as, I think, $6.20 a kilo from Starman. Now I think Starman Webster. So there's a couple of ripples in the market, but that was a record high price, a dizzyingly high price. and you have to wonder at the end of that whether it could be repeated in 2021. So I'm going to tell you the roundup of things I've heard without naming any names, and I'm going to be bold and not sit on the fence and give you my prediction for the macadamia price. The things I'm hearing is that both supply and demand have gone up in the last year. Most of the processors have been able to sell all of their nuts at the high price that they've been asking for. So we know that there's increasing demand. We also know that there's increasing supply. So it's not just a question of price being supply and demand. I mean, it is, but when both demand and supply are going up, it's a question of which is going up the fastest. If supply is going up faster than the demand is, the price will, in relative terms, drop, but it's likely to be a correction rather than a crash and a major drop. If demand was to go down by a large amount and supply was to go up, well, that's when you see a large price drop. We don't know exactly how much demand's gone up, although certainly indications are positive. COVID hasn't really affected demand, and you could be argued that COVID has even put demand up, in that people who go for luxury items like macadamias are buying those for their home instead of eating out or doing the things they used to like doing, but were stopped from doing by COVID. So there's a lot of sales into cooking, into home-based recipes, that sort of thing. On the other hand, the cafes that use macadamias for their treats, they're a lower source of demand. People ask me, what about China? What if China decides to stop importing macadamias from Australia? Well, our macadamia industry is a little bit luckier than most in that China is not an especially big customer. They take about 10% of Australia's macadamia exports. That makes them a smaller customer than Japan, than Germany. They're about half the size customer that the US is, and they're even a smaller customer than the rest of Asia, like the smaller countries in Asia. And we haven't even started to crack the Indian market for macadamias yet. So if, by some unfortunate reason, China decided to pick on the Australian macadamia industry, it would just be a matter of shrugging our shoulders. We can find other customers. And that hasn't happened yet, but even if it does happen, you wouldn't think that would affect the macadamia price. One thing that will affect the price is the Australian dollar. Because so much of our crop is exported, the price of the Australian dollar does sort of impact the returns that Australian farmers get. In general, we want a low dollar because, more overseas currency means more Australian dollars, and it works out rather well for us. But right now, as I speak, the Australian dollar is high 70s and sort of predicted perhaps to go to 80 US cents by the end of this year. That's quite different from last season's scenario where the Australian dollar sort of lagged around in the low 60 cent region. So that, I think, will produce a reduction in the Australian dollar price of macadamias and therefore the Australian dollars given to macadamia farmers for their crop. What about this year's crop? Will the predictions for this year's crop affect the macadamia price? The answer to that is yes, probably. Most farmers seem to have had a fairly good season, and as one agronomist or two agronomists have said to me, that the rain in December has really seen the nuts, to give it to quote-unquote, pop out. So they're looking forward to a reasonable crop of larger nuts. Larger nuts at the end of the day means more kernel, and more kernel means obviously more supply in the system, whether those be whole kernels or whatever else. So we think there's going to be some impact on the supply then. And the other factor, of course, the final factor is demand for these things. How's that going? Well, the Australian Macadamia Society have put forward a bold program to generate additional demand for Australian macadamias coming on into the future, called Maccelerate. They want to market all macadamias, but Australian macadamias in particular, as being the most safely grown, the cleanest, the greenest, and of course the most premium quality macadamias in the world. That's a sort of accolade we want to reserve for ourselves, given that we're no longer the largest producer of macadamias. That honour goes to South Africa at the moment, but there are plenty of other countries in Africa particularly that are sort of nibbling at Australia's heels, including Kenya. They don't have the same standards as us, they don't have the same growing environment as us, but they can produce macadamias, and they have, in some cases, a quite compatible climate. So, what's my take? Well, I'm betting that there will be a small drop in the price of macadamias for 2021. I don't think it will be very large. One, because of the backlash that it might get from growers who are expecting rivers of gold. But two, because demand is also going up at the same time as supply, I don't think it'll be a huge adjustment. I think the Australian dollar will be responsible for a lot of the price movement, and I think on that basis we might start seeing price offers in the range of $5.50 a kilo. Now, I've gone out on a limb. No one else I know is going out on a limb. I thought, well, whatever, it's my YouTube channel. I'm completely within my rights to make a fool of myself, and I will follow up this and either bang myself on the head or congratulate myself in a later episode. So there's my prediction, guys, but we will soon find out what the pricing rounds are, and I plan to do a little update video to supplement this one to bring you the details of what the various players are offering farmers in the 2021 year. I know that will help some of the people who watch my channel who are trying to break into the industry. It'll help them do their sums on what kind of return they can get from the very highly priced orchards they are looking at. Thanks for watching today, guys. I hope you stay well, and I will come back to you with another show shortly. Goodbye.